Hello and good afternoon, everybody. Hope you're keeping well. Thank you for joining us on today's session. Delighted to welcome you all here today for today's session. As mentioned, we're going to be looking at how we embrace neurodiversity in the workplace, and I'm delighted to welcome along our panel for the day. Really sort of experts in their field, all bringing a very different sort of perspective into the field, their expertise, their personal experience, and they're drivers for becoming part of this this network, really, in this industry, in this sector of where we live and work. So I'm just going to lead in just to make a couple of introductions in the short term. So delighted to welcome our first speaker of the day. Be bringing her on in just a minute is Nicola James, long-term colleague and friend. She is the founder and CEO at Lexxic. Specialise in assessments and advice around neurodiversity and disability in the workplace. Fantastic organisation doing great work right across the country. She's also, for her sins, a chartered occupational psychologist, and she'll be joining us in just a few minutes to give us some more insights into her background and how she sees the role and the importance of recognition within the workplace. Delighted to then be welcoming Becki to the stage, as it were. I'll be interviewing Becki just to get a little bit more background on her experience of guiding people in the workplace and her own experience of working with neurodiversity, and how she has been embracing tools like Pro-Workspace to help her within her working environment and her day-to-day life. I would recommend actually just taking a moment to look at Becki's LinkedIn profile. She's got more jobs than I think I've seen anybody have in a very long time. She's obviously a very, very busy lady. Either that or she never actually sort of updates it when she finishes a job, but I think they're all pretty current. But very widely respected and very busy lady, Becki, and I'm absolutely delighted to welcome her here today. And especially sort of speaking to her within her role within EMBED. So Becki, thank you for joining us, and I'll be interviewing you in just a little minute. Hopefully you're listening there. Also delighted to welcome Jonathan, another long-term colleague from across the sector. Jonathan is the CEO and founder of Pro-AT Group. He also runs an AT training organisation, so he has a lot of extensive first-hand knowledge of users, both in education and in the workplace, and how they engage with assistive technology, the needs that they have and the challenges that they face. So we'll be coming to Jonathan. My colleague Matt, who will be joining us in just one second, will be interviewing Jonathan and delving a little deeper into what he's been up to. I'm just going to slide across here for a second. Oh, there we go. So that's me and Matt for our sins, but we'll introduce you to Matt a little better in just one second. And also we're coming on at the very end of the session into a panel discussion. So feel free to pop any questions you have into the Q&A panel. We'll be picking those up towards the end of each session. Although if there's anything that particularly comes to mind as we're going on, please pop it in the chat. We'll be only too happy to engage with those as we go. So fab, looking forward to all of that. I think I just wanted to share just a couple of thoughts around neurodiversity myself, just before we sort of kick into the rest of the session today, and really sort of, you know, where our involvement comes from. So I'm going to go for a little pop quiz that I'm going to come back to in a second. But in terms of the term neurodiversity, does anybody know when that first was coined, and when that became sort of part of our everyday sort of conversation for those of us in the sector anyway? I'll be honest, I became sort of quite aware of it really around sort of the early sort of second decade of this century, around 2010. That really became quite a common phrase and became quite a buzz term for a while. Certainly a lot of the assistive technologies in the sector really jumped on that sort of neurodiversity bandwagon. But I'm waiting for a couple of answers in the chat. If anybody wants to throw an answer in there, I'll be interested to see if anybody can guess when it was actually sort of first recognised and coined. But it was coined by a sociologist called Judy Singer, and she used it to sort of as an encompassing term for conditions like dyscalculia, dyspraxia, dyslexia, autism, ADHD. And she wrote on sort of several papers there, and has developed that thinking around there, and it really has entered our our society now as one of those common terms to sort of embrace that entire sector. In looking at sort of recent research into neurodiversity, there's a couple of sort of key things that seem to come out in a lot of the research that's coming out at the moment and in sort of popular perception. And one is that neurodiversity is a natural and valuable form of human diversity. I knew Nicola would know the answer. And it really, there is no normal type of brain or mind. There's not one right style of neurocognitive functioning. That's all just a culturally constructed fiction, really. You know, we are all different. We all think in different ways. So to say that there is a right and a wrong, there is a black and a white around that is a very, very dangerous thing. And really sort of, you know, by imposing that sort of black or white, it becomes, it's no more valid really or conducive to a healthy society than things around the idea there's one normal or right gender or ethnicity or culture. So by sort of putting those concrete sort of barriers in place or the concrete definitions in place, that's not always really a constructive way of taking this conversation forwards. And I think in terms of our conversation today, looking at neurodiversity in the workplace, that we need to understand that within the workplace, within all of our society, we all think differently. So it's not just by that 10% neurodiverse that we're trying to help. We're actually helping everybody right across the sector and across society. And just to confirm, yes, Nicola was absolutely right. It was 1998 that the phrase was actually first coined, and it really did take around about sort of 10 to 12 years before it became kind of part of our common parlance. Anyway, thank you for that, guys. I'm just going to lead into Nicola joining us now. Nicola, are you there and able to come on the line?
Hello.
Hey, Fab. Hello, Nicola. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me.
No, our pleasure. Absolutely. So, Nicola, what I'm going to do, I'm just going to just turn off this PowerPoint from this end so that you can take the screen. The stage is yours to share with us your sort of your history and your skills within this area and your thoughts and insights. I'll come back on in around about 15-20 minutes. If you see me come on, or if you've got any questions, please just shout in the meantime. Would that be okay?
Lovely, thank you.
That's fab. Thanks, Nicola.
Hello, everybody. My name's Nicola James. I'm the founder of Lexxic, and I am a chartered occupational psychologist with a specialism in neuropsychology. So when I set my company up, it was just me, like going around and just trying to do like, just trying to do my thing to try and help people in neurodiversity and follow my heart. And when I first started my company, I was only 27, and I always thought I'm dyslexic, and I always felt like I wasn't good enough. So very early on in the days of Lexxic, I tended to recruit people who were the opposite of me, because that sort of empowered me in my strengths, because they could pick up things which maybe I found more difficult, like, for example, looking at the detail, or they could proofread some of my reports. And in the early days, my mum would proofread some of my reports. So, you know, this sort of carried on. And then you sort of start to realize, so I would come out with about 100 ideas a minute, and everyone would look at me, and I was like, I never really understood that they didn't interpret them as ideas. They interpreted them as every single thing that they had to do. So can you imagine someone sitting there going, oh my God, I have to do all these things. I'm just throwing out ideas, sort of reflecting externally. And then sometimes I would go right up into the clouds. And sometimes I found people who could go into the detail couldn't come up into the clouds. And I was like, hang on a minute. I've got all these great people who are really good people management. They're really good at their sort of job, but I'm struggling with not having the agility to sort of think bigger picture and think like me. Then I started to go, hang on a minute. So I always used to compare myself to my brother, and he was an A-grade student, classic academic. And I always used to think he was bright and I wasn't. And then I started to realize that actually I could think differently, and I could go at paces that a lot of people couldn't on certain things, like ideas and seeing ahead and seeing where a business needed to go and sort of feeling out through instinct what I needed to do to respond quickly. but I couldn't go into the level of detail these people were going into. So then I started to realize, hang on a minute, we need both. We need the agility of being able to think, bigger picture and creatively and make fast decisions and not think in a linear way. But we also need people who think in a linear way that can look at the detail and the method and the process. So then I started to build a different relationship with myself. So rather than saying, I feel not as clever as everybody else, I feel dumb, I feel stupid, I need to prove myself, I started to go, oh, I understand why I've got the grades I've got. I understand why I'm doing so well. It's my ability to critically think. It's my ability to reason. But at school, that wasn't marked as a grade A. That wasn't marked as a grade B. It was very much writing essays, linear thinking, and something I really struggled with. Very often in debates, I'd get really high grades. I could write the same essay on the same debate. I could get a first on my debate, and I actually failed an essay because I knew too much on a subject. So I got really confused with how to order this essay. And I remember going in to see this lecturer and going, you say in my essay, I don't know anything on the subject, but you've graded me on a presentation that I gave on the same subject and gave me a first. And then I told her what I knew. So the point I'm trying to get to is, in business, if you recruit one type of person, you get one type of brain. Therefore, everyone might agree with each other, and then because they're taking on the same approach, but that doesn't allow you to innovate and evolve. And we need lots of different types of brains and lots of different types of people to support creativity and moving forward. So if you take Lexxic, we really like bringing on different types of brains, and it just allows us to be much more malleable. So the person designing the training and coming up with all the ideas going at 100 miles an hour won't be the accountant perhaps, but the person that's working, doing the people management and doing all the detail and all the technical checking might not be having all the 100 ideas, but together it works really well. And that's why neurodiversity is so important in business. What happened in some of these sort of early business days of selection and assessment is they wanted this sort of profile of an all-round person with all these skills. So they selected all these types of people. But what they hadn't factored in is what they're doing is selecting people that are quite similar. So what you can find in neurodiversity, not all the time, but this is sort of a personal experience. Sometimes people can be very good at certain things, but they might not be an all-rounder. But if you don't have that person that's really good at certain things, sometimes your business can't respond in the way you need to respond. So you can see sort of some of the changes in some of the recruitment processes in the larger companies, because they're starting to realise they don't want everyone to tick the box. They don't want everyone to be good at everything. They need to have people that think differently in order to respond fast enough to an ever-changing environment. And if you don't do that, you don't have the agility in brains, because if you don't get difference in thought, if you don't get difference in thinking, you do not learn to progress, because you all agree, and therefore you don't get the challenges. It's a bit like Elon Musk. He throws loads of people together in a melting pot, has lots of different skills, and they might not know how to do it, the individual, but all together they create something new that has never been done before. And that's why it's so important to select beyond a certain type, because then you get the creativity, then you get the agility, then you can move faster, and that just blows performance out the water. Because in order to perform, you need conflict, you need different ways of thinking. So how does that impact neurodiversity? Neurodiversity is a very broad term. It covers a lot of different conditions, and people in those conditions will have a large range of different strengths and different profiles. So, I'm dyslexic, but I'm quite auditory. I'm not a creative artist, but just, a lot of people who are artistic can be creative. So, it's actually really important to look beyond this label, and it's important to look at what is somebody good at. So rather than saying, I don't want this, you say you should be recruiting for the role. So what can sometimes happen is people use lots of a selection and assessment process, and actually it's actually designing out what you need in that role. If you want somebody who thinks quickly, if you want someone creative, and you assess them on all these detailed tasks, you're probably going to lose that brain type. So, in the stuff that we're doing at Lexxic, like Neurodiversity Smart, which is looking at things like accreditations for organisations, we're teaching people to have selection processes that are actually recruiting for the skills that they need in the role. And equally, if someone is neurodiverse, we sort of get them to think about, rather than what type of job do you apply for, it's what are you good at and what skills do you want in a job? And then you're aligning yourself to the role rather than sort of looking at the job type. Because sometimes people with neurodiverse might not understand their strengths, particularly if they've been through an academic system that doesn't really show them what they're good at. So in this world with technology, there's way more emphasis on being creative, thinking outside the box. You know, you've got lots of recruitment schemes coming through from these tech companies, and they're like, we want neurodiverse employees because we want people that think differently, or we want people that are really good at looking at patterns and trends, but they don't have to necessarily be good people managers. And sometimes you can get people that want somebody to be able to do everything. And sort of running Lexxic, we recognise that now. We used to want people to be able to do everything, but actually you might get someone who's a really good coach. And so it's about ensuring you support and develop flexibility in the career so people can have different paths, because someone that's really good technically might not be a really good coach, or somebody that's really good at managing people might not necessarily be someone that wants to, you know, look at finance, for example. And that's why it's important in development systems to have agility. So if you have agility, in your career development process, if you make sure you are selecting the job rather than just using generic selection and assessment tests, which can design out the candidate you're actually looking for, then you're going to start attracting in the talent. Therefore, you're going to get the right fit for the role. Therefore, you're going to get the diversity in brain. And all of that inclusion and diversity means your business performance will just drive, because the more difference in thinking, the more challenging, the more diversity of thought, the larger the ability to adapt. Unfortunately, very often children are externalized their value based upon their grade. And the grading system and the educational system is very linear in a lot of cases. So what that means is, unfortunately, somebody might come with a very neurodiverse brain who's very talented, but because they've been through this stunted system of, you know, your value is your grade, they might go, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not confident. And they learn to externalize their value on their grade, because that's what school teaches them. We must get A's, we must get A's. And so it's really important we look at the schooling system as well, because it's outdated. It doesn't provide us with this depth and agility to recognize all the different minds that we have and allow people to be strong in different areas. So, you know, that's something that's really important to address. And you know, when we talk to people who've got kids with neurodiversity and they go, there's such pressure to get into schools and such pressure to get grades, you know, I always say, try and focus on what the child is good at, because when you focus on what the person is good at, they might need coaching on development on certain areas. But if they see they're good at something, they'll develop that skill, they'll develop what aligns with their soul, their heart. And then what happens is they will have that self-confidence. So they will make their way in the world and they will find something that aligns with what they're good at. That could be, you know, gardening, that could be, you know, being in sales, it could be a wide range of things. But the fundamental skill to ingrain in the child is self-confidence and self-belief. Because if somebody learns that they're not good enough as a child, they'll start viewing the world as against them rather than for them. And they'll start seeing the world as something which is they're battling with, because they're not fitting their brain into this, you know, round hole that they think they're meant to fit into. Whereas if they start to explore, you know, what am I good at? Where do I fit? Where are my strengths? Where can I bloom? Where can I excel? And they have that self-belief, they will find their path because they'll attract it, and they'll be making decisions based upon what they know about themselves. So when you bring that into the workplace, that's why coaching is important. You know, it's not trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. It's trying to get the best out of somebody. And you might have somebody that comes in and you might go, actually, they're not good at that, but they're really good at that. So if you develop them and have a talent path where they're really good at that, you'll get people coming through and you'll get, you know, much more out of that person. And also, you know, I've worked in companies where you have somebody who might be in a shop floor in their really practical role, and they go, they're doing really well, and they go into a management role. It's very paper-based. So they've gone from a very practical role to a paper-based role. Suddenly their performance drops off the cliff. But actually the role above, which might be more sort of agile and more about sort of managing people again, like an MD or a more leadership management role, would be where they're good at. So I think we have to get rid of this linear career path, because somebody who's very good at detail and paperwork might not be so good at the agility with people. And so sometimes what happens is, you know, people have things like technical routes and non-technical routes, but it's really important to have the agility and flexibility in the career to develop somebody. And regardless of being neurodiverse, it's really important to have migrations of all different types of brains. Because the more you have that, the more you can proactively think, the more you can respond to different types of challenges and think about innovative solutions, which then impacts upon the bottom line, which then impacts upon business performance, impacts upon creativity, and then the cycle goes round. Very often with unconscious bias, people can recruit people like themselves. So everyone agrees and everyone's harmonious and it's all lovely, but that doesn't then relate to challenge. That relates to people agreeing with you because you're similar to them. And you know, you won't get the diversity of thought because you've got similar types of personality types. And therefore you can sometimes stagnate, because when you need to respond to different types of challenges that come into business, so you need different brain types on different types of challenges. That's why it's so important to have that diversity of solution. And then, you know, in Lexxic, we have a variety of people. It's, you know, some people are neurodiverse, some people aren't neurodiverse, but you do find that within a team, by blending lots of different types of skills and talents and people types, you just get way more out because you are bringing in lots of different ideas and experiences. So where am I at? What are my sort of final key messages? I think my final key messages are that people can have an assumption on what neurodiversity is. People can be scared of recruiting somebody that is neurodiverse. People on the neurodiverse spectrums of different conditions are, it's a very broad category of person with lots of different talents, challenges, with a wide range of people who don't know that they're neurodiverse. So it's important to really promote the individual, have attraction strategies to attract the neurodiverse brain, because it comes with so many assets and it comes with so many skills, and it's really important to recruit the right person for the job. And we see organisations wanting to do more and more of that now. So we've got organisations really proactively looking at recruitment and attraction strategies, because they're finding that in the neurodiverse talent pool, that is where they're finding the type of person they're looking for that role. We've got, it's becoming more like mental health in terms of awareness around it. So there's much more support around providing adjustments, around providing diagnosis, around providing sort of workplace assessments. And it is just adding so much value to the organisation, to the extent where you have lots of recruitment companies coming up with neurodiverse recruitment. And we just get more and more organisations realising that what people thought neurodiversity was, it's not. And people realising that you've got such a pool of creativity, talents, potential, that people are realising they're starting to tap into. A lot of people will have heard this before, but the amount of entrepreneurs that who are neurodiverse is phenomenal. And if you think about that brain type, it's about ability to think ahead, ability to create outside the box. And when somebody goes through challenges or trauma in childhood, they learn skills very early on to adapt, to be resilient, to go round the problem. And when you bring that type of profile into a workplace with somebody who's had to be more resilient in a system that might not support their learning style, you just get people that can adapt, people that can think out the box, people that are resilient, people that can respond to the ever-changing working environment. And that is worth its weight in gold. So that's my final message. Thank you very much, Anthony.
Oh, thank you, Nicola. Massively insightful as always. I've written down a whole bunch of questions on the back of an envelope, as I was thoroughly expect as I was as you were chatting away. One of the main questions, well, two main, there's dozens, but anyway, the ones that spring to mind immediately. You touched briefly on the mental health aspect and sort of the challenges to people with neurodiversity, with mental health conditions in the workplace, and how those are accommodated, supported. Is that something that employers are adapting to embrace, or is that still a struggle as well?
I think, mental health goes way beyond neurodiversity. I think, you see more and more with social media, people externalizing their value through the nature of Instagram, what they should look like, how they should be. So rather than accepting who they are themselves, they're seeing this external thing they think they should be. And therefore, what you're getting generations of people that have come through with this technology having real severe mental health problems because they're not internalizing their value, they're externalizing their value. And so not only are they externalizing their value on their grade, they're externalizing their value on what they look like or what they think they should look like or what they think their body should be like. So mental health is just massive, and mental health is beyond neurodiversity, and it's just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger. When it comes to neurodiversity, if somebody only gets an assessment or a diagnosis, if they do not get this aftercare support, which is things like the adjustments and the coaching, they can sort of stop in a way of, I have this label. And sometimes what that can turn into psychologically is somebody can become a victim of their condition. So that's why it's so important to give somebody the adjustments, because when you get the adjustments and the coaching, you then start to see your strengths. You start to see how you do things differently and you get different outputs. Very simple grades. For example, when I used to read and reread in the library and cry and try and get all this information, and suddenly I have text-to-speech that reads for me. I'm not having to reread or get other people to reread my work because I can't process the written word anymore because my brain's so tired. And suddenly I've saved myself a weekend because I have a technology that strategizes and changes how I do that task. So, it's really important that regardless if you get a diagnosis, it's really important you get the strategies that work for you and you understand how you learn, because that then gives you the confidence to do things in a way which you might not have been taught at school, because it's still a very certain type of learning.
Yeah, I think the strategies are so key to all of it. Janine has just popped a message in the chat window. I completely agree. It's so important to follow through with individuals and help them develop their own plan that builds on their strengths. Absolutely spot on, Janine. Nicola, I've got a whole bunch of other questions for you, but I'm going to save them for the Q&A at the end. Otherwise, I'll probably take up the rest of the session just quizzing you here and now. So thank you very, very kindly for your time. We'll look forward to catching up with you again in just about...
That's me fidgeting with a peg. It's a bit like a fidget cube, it just helps me concentrate.
Just so you know, Oscar started on Rubik's Cubes now, so yeah, he's constantly fidgeting. But anyway, that's another story, guys. Thank you, Nicola. I'll leave you to go and have a cup of tea or whatever takes your fancy at this point, and I'll welcome Becki back to the session, if I could, please. Hello, Becki.
Oh yeah, you're all right. Hello, everybody.
Good. Very good. Becki, thank you massively for joining us today and sharing your wealth of experience. I've just got to ask before we start, having taken a look at your LinkedIn profile, are you really doing all of those different things at the moment?
Yeah, because I really enjoy what I do. I actually am 25 years this year in heritage, wow. Which was my job that I wanted to do since I was 6. And for me, it's a whole sort of collection of different roles to support people, but also the idea that we can make the world a better place. So absolutely, yeah, I really enjoy what I do.
Fab, that's great. I think that's the least we can all hope for, but it's amazing how many of us or people out there who never manage to sort of do that thing that makes them happy in their work. And I've got to say, dread to imagine how many years I've been involved in assistive technology now, but I still find it as fascinating and as engaging as the day I got involved, because it's always changing, it's always helping, it's always doing some wonderful things. So no, that's awesome. Thank you, Becki. I've got a few sort of things I'd like to quiz you on if you've yeah. So you are, amongst other things, the lead access auditor and consultant and heritage partner for EMBED. Can you tell us a little bit more about who EMBED are and what you're doing there?
I would be delighted to, because I'm very excited about EMBED. Basically, EMBED is a consortium of independent consultants and thought leaders, and we've got sort of collectively 30 years experience within the EDI field, and we're a collective of all different sectors, of people, of lived experience as well, and we support organisations that are passionate and committed, as we are, in respect to making the world where everybody feels valued and supported and feel included. And we offer sort of services and practical support to all sectors and organisations on sort of their inclusion journey as a constructive critical friend. So we don't sort of go, you know, that's wrong, or what, you know, what's the thinking behind that? It's more about being a constructive friend to support with practical help, to move the conversation into positive action. And, you know, we're delighted, obviously, to have Aventido work with us as a fellow partner. And it's a really exciting opportunity. So I work as the heritage partner to EMBED. And when I first started out in heritage, I actually left the sector, and I said to myself, we've got to look at what's out there in terms of positive solutions that are very much based on the lived experience of the individual, but also in terms of what that lived experience is through collaboration. And the key thing was with that is that we can now support heritage organisations through things such as, it doesn't matter what size they are, it doesn't matter what they collect, it doesn't matter if they're whole voluntary run to a big national. It's about sort of looking at people-focused strategy and tools and resources, so people feel more confident, but also about those time-honoured issues that we have and how we can move that forward. So it's about providing those cross-sector approaches into the heritage sector to support more sort of representation, and also in terms of more positive action. So it's at EMBED, we provide sort of new approaches and fresh insights. We also talk about nurturing skills and knowledge and awareness, so people don't feel overwhelmed. So if somebody says, I've got neurodiversity, they don't go, wonderful. What do I do like that as an employer? It's more about, right, okay, right, what do I need to do? What do I need to learn? Talk to the EMBED guys like that. And also that with all of the situation that we've had with COVID, this terrible pandemic that we've had, the world has changed, and as we work from home, and also in terms of how organisations adapt through all these very sudden rapid changes to create more sort of sustainability in the intersectional inclusive recovery, to understanding people's different needs, but also how those needs may change. So this is where we come in. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Really great. It's more than nice to hear that effort is being made within the sector. I know sort of you've kindly offered to come and sort of join us today, and also share your own personal insights into your own experiences of neurodiversity, and I think sort of from that perspective it is absolutely fantastic. So in terms of your neurodiversity and how that affects how you work and getting what you need to do your job within the workplace to enable you to work at your best, that's a very crucial thing. Can you give us some sort of insights into how some of your sort of challenges and what you've experienced and the strategies that you found useful within your work?
Yeah, so it's an interesting one. So just sort of coming back to what I do with EMBED, one of the things I do is an access auditor. I love access auditing because I'm a details lady. It was interesting listening to Nicola, because I like my details, but also I form sort of patterns and notions in my head that sort of connect like that, because I'm neurodivergent. like that. So they shape and turn and form into all different things at any given time. And particularly when I'm relaxed. And because of that, I'm part of the advisory group for the PAS 6463 for British standards, which is really exciting. Now, the key thing is that what does that got to do with my neurodiversity? Well, if anybody's on the call who's neurodivergent, one of the key things about this is when we work in our workplaces, no matter what they are, if you've got somebody who has sensory processing difficulties and you're sitting next to a coffee machine, or somebody who likes to whistle when they're happy about something, that in itself can create how you sort of process your information and how you're able to look at what you're doing, how you concentrate, and you feel that anxiety go up and 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 up. And one of those key things about that is always, what can I do to manage myself in that situation? So one of the things in terms of how I've been as a neurodivergent person has been very much on a journey. But the reason why I mentioned about the workplace in particular is that I'm neurodivergent. I'm proud to be neurodivergent. I'm late diagnosis. I was 23. I also support people who are non-assessed people who will say, I think there's something going on, or I support people with strategy. So I do different roles in respect to that. And it's fantastic to be able to say to somebody, here is a potential idea, but it's up to you to form it and shape it and how it will support you, like that. But in terms of getting what I need, it's also about assessing what the situation is, because one of the things that we find a lot with neurodivergent people in particular, the recruitment is really important, but it's also ensuring that people remain in their work as well. So you've got all this wonderful talent, but how can we make sure that that talent remains there because they want to? What happens if that relationship between the boss feels threatened, the boss needs coaching? If there's a toxic work environment, what can we do to change that? It's about unpicking that, but also actually just coming back to that is, how do we stop that from happening? How do we reduce the risk? One of the things that happens a lot within competitive sectors, with myself being in heritage, is the need to self-advocate. Hello folks, don't forget, I can't do that because I've got neurodiversity, or I can't do this because I'm a neurodivergent person, I've got dyspraxia, or I may need extra time just to get this done. And sometimes if you're time pressured, the emphasis is on performance, but not necessarily on whether or not that is the right way for everyone to be managed within the workplace. So one of the things that I'm really excited about with EMBED is the support of a passport system with an EDI structure, and how we can create workplaces where it's about the lived experience, but also this is a opportunity that can actually benefit everyone. So you're not in a situation where you feel, hi, yeah, I've got neurodiversity, self-advocate, but also, what can I do about this? I've got to remind the boss, or we've got a new project coming up. How am I going to talk to them about it? We've got potential about all sorts of things. What can I do about it as a neurodivergent person? Because for me, who's had their own sort of knocks and shakes within all of this, it's about being able to feel safe within a work environment to say, actually, I'm having a really one of them days. Is anybody else having one of them days? It's hot outside, it's a bit muggy, people can't concentrate. It's about having a situation where that everyone can feed into in terms of inclusion, but also that what can we understand more about the lived experience of different people and the intersectionality of neurodiversity as well. So it's one of those things where, for me, the more I work sort of within all of this, the more it's more about organisational opportunity more than anything, and how the organization can reach out to that person to say, it's all right, I get it, like that. And if they've had a negative experience within the workplace, it's about how can we make it better for you so you don't have to worry, like that. That reduction of potential problems, that whole kind of plethora of wonderful different tools and resources that we can have that benefit all of us.
I think you hit upon a really, really strong point there. And in terms of the workplace being welcoming, and, you know, whether that's sort of, you know, working with the line managers to understand, working with colleagues to sort of know better how to sort of communicate and embrace and to accommodate. You know, one of the things that's always dear to my heart is assistive technology. That's sort of where I sort of specialize with the work that I do. And I know you are, as well as a fellow lover of spreadsheets, as I am, also a very enthusiastic advocates for assistive technology in the workplace. Do you use a lot of assistive technology yourself? And, you know, how do you find that impacts, you know, the impact it has on you, as well as, you know, as an employee, but also for the business, because, you know, the business benefit is also crucial within all of this.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that I use a lot is those integrated tools that you get. One thing I've got to say wholeheartedly, I was assessed in 1996, where assistive technology wasn't as mainstream as it was now, and it makes the conversation so much easier. But also that the price of assistive tech has gone down as well. So it's becoming more the sort of thing that you can have in your back pocket, like in terms of Google Maps to get yourself around, being able to look at things like Grammarly when you think, does that look right? I don't know. Oh, that's a better way of putting it. Particularly if you're feeling particularly tired that day as well, and you're thinking it's just not happening. Also about that whole situation of things like voice activated technology, but also things like I use the Kindle Fire a lot for documents and for PDFs and books and audiobooks and all sorts. I use a whole plethora of different tools, but they tend to be more towards ones that I've chosen myself because I know that they're out there. And I think one of the things that I find is like assistive technology moves on so quickly that it's very difficult if you're a non-techie like me to keep up with everything and think, well, what's going on? And then you'll hear something that you guys have mentioned and I'm like, oh, I want one of those. And you're like, you just download the app and you're like, that's it, I've got to try it out, like that. So I use a whole sort of range of tools. And for me, it's about being able to do things that are time-based, so you get more out of your day. It sounds really quite strange, but also like one of the things I like about the Pro-Workspace is the idea it's done. And I can come back to that whenever I want, and it still looks fabulous. And it's organized, it's all there. I don't have to worry about it or what I've done with it. It's all there and put together. And that when it comes to the overlay function, I've got visual stress and my color's green. I'm absolutely obsessed with green as a background in the house and all things like that. But it's for me that whole situation of being able to put some more in my day, because when I get tired, I get really tired. It affects my mood. It affects sort of all things. I go for the biscuit tin, you know, to try and get my levels up of energy. But what happens is that if I can have something that actually reduces the fatigue because there's an overlay option to it, or there's a different way of being able to engage in that information, it's so much easier. And it just takes out so much anxiety.
One of the things I always struggle with when I get tired, that I feel the same, is that ability to handle multiple pieces of information and stay organized. I sort of struggle to sort of maintain that focus really in that organization.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And I think for me, it's that in terms of organization, it's about having something online as well, because the key thing with that is that not only have you got it on your phone if you need it, but also if you've got it on on your computer at home. You're not having to print out loads of stuff. So if your bosses, if your workplace has got a big green sort of strategy coming in, you've got that sort of assistive tech that sort of segues into that environmental policy. So it creates that kind of intersectionality in respect to that. But also that when it comes to filing, there's less pressure on filing as well, because I hate filing. And it's one of them things where if you've got it all together on one platform, or if you've got it on the drive or anything like that, it's just so much easier to keep yourself organized, and you feel good about it as well. You feel like, I can handle this, confident, you don't feel overwhelmed, and also your energy levels are there too.
I think that is one of the key points, isn't it, when it comes to many sort of AT solutions, is that it helps with the condition itself, but it also minimizes that feeling of overwhelm, that feeling of pressure that sort of enables you, to maintain your mental health and your positivity to carry on sort of doing that task or that role, and maintaining those energy levels, because you don't feel that exhaustion.
I tell you what as well though, there's just one thing that's just popped into my head I love about it the most, and that is that I could have a piece of assistive tech that is actually somebody who is, for want of a better phrase, neurotypical, because we're all neurodivergent. It is something that somebody who may not identify as dyslexic, spraxic, or, I know that there's a lot of brilliant conversations around what neurodiversity actually means at the moment, which is fantastic. But it's the idea that we can have a conversation about the same book or the same information or the same report that we've read, and we can grab it quickly, read it in the way we want, but we may be two completely different people. It's not something specifically for neurodivergent people. I have experienced times when strategies have been suggested to me where it's like, this is for people like you, and it's horrible. It's more about, this is actually something that will benefit the entire team. And that's when it gets exciting.
No, you're absolutely right. I think there is a really interesting bleed over the last few years between productivity tools and assistive technology. And as you sort of very rightly say, there is no sort of black and white line between people who are neurodivergent and those who are neurotypical. And the benefits that almost all the workforce have from using some of these solutions is incredible. And we do sort of get a number of people in the workplace who are sort of coming back and asking for the AT, even though they don't consider themselves to have any neurodiverse challenges. So no, it's a very interesting sort of, like say, across sort of pollination really of that assistive and productive.
I think for me, it's that whole situation as well about the conversation and the relationship between the boss and the organization, the boss, and also in terms of the individual, but also that the different sectors. So EMBED works right across different sectors, and it's the idea that actually this is something for which it's a holistic responsibility, and that in itself is a really key part, particularly in terms of the sustainability of different sectors, but also in terms of how they can support workplace needs and how that can actually cascade to the customer experience as well in terms of the economic support and recovery.
No, that's fab. Do you know, I was going to wrap up with one last question, actually, Becki, because we've only got a couple of moments left before I need to hand over the stage to Matt and Jonathan. But I was going to say, if you've got any sort of final comments about why you think assistive technology should be encouraged at a strategic level within the workplace.
I think it's absolutely critical. And I think it's about how we can frame it in terms of a business need, particularly in respect to people who may be non-assessed, and also others who may not, that need to bed in new strategies, particularly if they're taking on board new responsibilities via a new job or a new job description if they've been promoted, and how that can actually, the assistive tech can support everyone, particularly in regards to being able to reduce any risk of toxicity, but also in regards to that whole holistic collective team experience as well, because it creates more psychologically safe environments, but also support right up to productivity as well.
I think that's crucial. I think that psychological safety is such an important aspect of all of this, and what a fantastic note to end our conversation on. Thank you massively, Becki, for that. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Matt, who's I don't know whether he's waving at the screen or adjusting his camera, but Becki, we'll welcome you back in a minute for the Q&A after Matt and Jonathan have taken up our next 20-minute session. So Jonathan, is Jonathan there? I can't see him on my screen.
Jonathan is here.
I'm here, I believe, hopefully.
Fab, yeah, we can hear you. Right, in which case, I'm going to hand over to Matt and Jonathan. Jonathan is, as I mentioned earlier, amongst other things, a developer of assistive technology, and recently launched Pro-Workspace into the sector. So, Matt, Jonathan, I will leave you guys, and I'll be back in around about 20 minutes, if that's okay.
Perfect. Don't go too far. Yeah, well, thank you, Nicola. Thank you, Becki, as well. Becki and I work together on lots of different bits and pieces as well, so it's always great to hear what Becki's got to say, and of course Nicola as well. So thank you guys for your valuable input so far. So Jonathan, great to have you this afternoon. Just to set the scene, in case Jonathan's looking remarkably refreshed this afternoon, considering that he has just had a new addition to his family. So hopefully there has been some sleep this week. I know it's been a little bit intermittent so far from our conversations.
I'm glad you brought it up, Matt. Yeah. So if I start rambling, Matt, just jump in, because it's she's my third child, and she's definitely the loudest one already. So the sleep and all that comes with it. But no, we're getting on. We're fine.
Excellent, good. Glad to hear it. And I know there was a teabag emergency last week, but I know that's been rectified as well. So that should hopefully get you through those sleepless nights. So yeah, I'd like to say, Jonathan, thank you for your time this afternoon. I guess what we wanted to do in this sort of little part of the session and stuff was just really a bit of a few questions to yourself, really, in terms of, as Antony said, a developer of assistive technology. Obviously, we've worked with you for numerous years now, and are looking forward to the years ahead and stuff with obviously what you're developing. But just for those on the call, I guess, who aren't familiar with yourself, if you just wanted to sort of just do a short intro to who you are and what you do, and I think also a little bit of your background as well, because I think that's really important in sort of setting the scene, really.
Yeah, sure. My name's Jonathan Webb. I'm the Managing Director or CEO, depending where you are in the world, of Pro-AT Group, and we develop assistive technology, and we also have an assistive technology training company, which is what I started in 2008. So that's kind of where the background for developing the technology came from, was working as trainers and building the training company up, seeing where the gaps perhaps were in the market. And I think we came in at a good time. I think the tech's really taken off over the last kind of 10 years. And some brilliant kind of improvements and innovative ideas coming out. My focus, I just love finding solutions to the difficulties people face, and helping support those people, if it's in education or at work, and knocking those barriers down through assistive technology, and trying to come up with new ideas rather than it just being the same kind of technology. If someone's dyslexic, let's give them a spell checker. Well, are they having to write anything? No. Well, they may not. I mean, a spell checker is handy for everybody, but they may not need one. So I like to kind of approach it from a slightly different angle. And then I also like to do events like this, where we trying to raise awareness about assistive technology, for obvious reasons, and to make it more known in the community, but also from a selfish point of view, I get sick and tired of explaining to people what I do for a job, and getting compared to Chandler from Friends, where nobody actually really understands what he does for a job. So it'd be great if you could just say, I work in this with assistive technology, and people understand it rather, or you have to explain it for a few minutes and they kind of just look at you and say computers, and why don't you just say computers? Well, there's a little bit more to it, but okay, we'll call it computers for now. But yeah, I think raising awareness is a key part to it. Yeah.
Absolutely, and I think, in fact, you and I think we're at the same event as part of a DAT Europe event, where assistive technology, where you try and explain that to people who aren't maybe in the sector or understand it, you do default back to the simple answer of I work in computers.
Yeah.
I think something you mentioned as well, which is quite interesting, and something that again is very close to our heart, is creating solutions for a problem, and therefore producing software that helps individuals with particular aspects of, like you say, even their academic work or even the workplace, and providing those solutions in a format that is accessible to them, but also makes their life a lot easier, which I think is the most important thing. In terms of creating those solutions, I guess probably the burning question, probably me as well as anybody else, is, how do you go about developing assistive technology for users? What's the sort of, I guess, how did you come up with those solutions? How did you, especially with, like I say, with Pro Study, which is the solution that obviously students and stuff within universities are using, what's the sort of basis of that? How did you come up with those sort of ideas, I guess, and develop them, really?
Be careful how I word this, but you're essentially just taking other people's ideas and developing them. So yeah, I think it's really important to have purpose-built assistive technology that's innovative and new, and really helps the specific issues that people are facing. So you're not just looking at what a feature is or what you want to build. You really need to find out why. So why do they need a solution? And from that, you can build a better solution, essentially. So it doesn't matter if you're kind of developing a single feature or you're developing a brand new product. Because we're on kind of the 5th and 6th versions of our products now, and every time we kind of go through the same process. So we will get a selection of end users, and we will ask for their input. So once we find out why we're doing something, we'll kind of go to them with an idea and get the selection of end users and just gather their feedback, basically. And then because we've got the training company as well, we can get our trainers who work in Access to Work and those sectors, and then we can get all those people together and gather the feedback. And that's critical to what we do, because this actually goes back to what Nicola was saying earlier. If it was just my ideas, it just wouldn't work. If it's just, I think this will help this person. So we really need to always get the end user in. And then I was taught it as a perception blindness, is if you're in a meeting and you come up with the first idea and everybody says, yes, that's a great idea, you've got problems. You need it to go back and forth and evolve and improve, and that's getting different people's minds involved, and exactly what Nicola was saying, and that's how you get the best ideas, really. From there, we start designing the software. That's the most fun part to me, is we're getting to see it all come together, getting graphic designers involved. There's not a coder in sight at this point, so we are just drawing how we want it. My main role at that point is to try and take as many steps out of each process. So as we're building a feature, I just don't want there to be 4 or 5 or 6 steps for something to work. It's got to be 1 click, 2 clicks, and it happens. So we try and automate as much as possible. And then we have to get the coders in at some point, which is where the arguments start, and we get kind of the initial development done, and then we say, no, that's taken too many steps, and we have to explain to them why we need the steps taken out. They come to slightly accept that it's going to happen my way and the way we need it. So we work quite well together, and their way of thinking also helps, because they are very kind of linear, and let's get this from A to B. And so let's cut out all the bits in between. Once we've done that, we go right back into the solution and look at why we were building it in the first place. So what we're trying to do is always think about the individual's needs.
Yeah.
It's easy to think, oh, let's design something that's going to help everybody. But what I've found through doing this job is if you develop something with the individual's needs at heart, it will naturally become inclusive anyway. So you'll find that, and again, this is what Becki was just saying, people will say, oh, this is good for this person and this person, even though it wasn't originally designed to help that person, but it's got to be designed for the individual's needs that you set out to help, and the inclusivity will come. We try to make it as accessible as possible. I like to say it's born accessible, so it will work with all the accessibility options on browsers or operating systems, and then from there it's very easy to then add more features in at a later date. If you kind of develop the product and then come back to it and try and make it accessible, it can be quite difficult because you're practically going to change all the features of how they work. So try and make it born accessible. And then kind of lastly, really, it's quality control, testing, get as many people to test it before you launch. Don't rush the launch. I'd rather delay a launch by a couple of months, as Matt experienced on many occasions. It just doesn't even listen to me when I give him a launch date anymore, because he knows it's going to be 2 months further down the line. But that's really important to me, because if somebody uses a piece of technology and it doesn't work, you've kind of lost them straight away. It's got to work and work well. And the last thing to always have in the back of my mind is always try and make the software enjoyable. Computers are here to help people, and I think they've almost become a burden for a lot of people. So the software can be enjoyable. I'm not going to say it can be fun, but it can be enjoyable. So if you can, with our software Pro-Workspace, you can gather research, and it's a bit more fun or enjoyable to do that. You're gonna get on with the software a lot better. So there's lots of stages to the process, but always the individual needs. Just got to keep going back to that, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a few bits there, and I know you and I've had this conversation, and I've spoken to lots of people about this. Is that it's a piece of software again where you're listening to user feedback. You're creating things based on lots of different ways that people are interacting with software. You're not just providing them with a list of features saying this is what we say you need. This is very much built around what people are experiencing, the barriers that they're facing, and how actually the software can overcome that. And as you said, lots of different input creates lots of different features for people who genuinely will benefit from it. Just for those of you who don't know, Jonathan has a piece of software called Pro Study within the education sector that we've been working on for a long time now with him. And there's one particular feature that, and I'm going to bring this up because this is always one that I personally use, and it's the ability to bookmark a web page. Now, it sounds the most innocuous feature in a piece of software, but the ability to bookmark a web page against a particular piece of research and to have a meaning behind it is incredible in terms of the feedback that we get, that people say, this is brilliant. They've seen users with 15, 20 tabs open because they don't want to lose a web page. I am one of these people that will favorite a web page, but I've got actually no reason or no understanding several months later as to why I did it. What was the purpose of that? So that's quite a good indicator of how a feature can really benefit somebody. And it can be the smallest type of feature ever, but actually it's going to benefit that one individual, then it's actually done the job that it's supposed to be doing. So we obviously spoke about in terms of obviously the developing side of stuff, and obviously Pro Study was the education version and stuff, but obviously there is a link over from education into that workplace and how some of the software can work in both sectors. But obviously I think what I guess you've learned from that is that there is a specific product now that takes that education side, but into a work environment and actually incorporates what individuals will come up against in the workplace. So I guess, you know, what sort of needs are you seeing that need addressing and stuff, and obviously, you know, hence the creation of Pro-Workspace?
So yeah, so Pro-Workspace, it really came from working closely with students in postgrad, PhDs, and they would ask the question, can we use this software in the workplace? And, you know, of course you can, as long as the workplace allows it. So, but there are some, you know, key differences that would be needed. And so I thought, well, why don't we, you know, research this and look at the if we could develop a purpose-built software for the workplace. So first thing we did look to see, you know, is there a transition from education into work? Is the research kind of the same? And we found, yeah, largely it was. You know, if you've researched a lot for a PhD or whatever you've been doing, then it's very similar in the workplace, really. So why can't you have a piece of assistive technology to continue helping with that? You know, they don't want to use pro study and then go to the workplace and they can't use anything, so they've got to kind of go back to the old method of copy and paste and everything else like that. So that's where the kind of passion for it came, and it really inspired me to get on with this idea. So yeah, if someone's experiencing a difficulty at university, they're probably experiencing the same, well, they will be experiencing the same difficulty at work. So when we kind of interviewed people or asked the question or got case studies, we found they were getting overwhelmed at work, they were getting disorganized, struggling with their motivation. Again, what Becki said, stress of losing your research. Is there anything more stressful if you've been working all day? And they just want to be able to kind of, you know, work in small bursts and come back to it and it's still there. You don't want to be, you know, coming back to your research, and we all do it. You kind of read what you've done. You think, what was I in the middle of doing? And you kind of have to start again. And so, yeah, so there was, you know, there's a clear similarity between the two sectors, really. The main difference is that we have to consider the corporation as well with Pro-Workspace. So there's a bit about, you know, security and how it links to the cloud, so you can disable features and different things like that. But by separating the two products, we can now continue to develop the features. And you know, because of the way we're structured, we're quite quick, and I feel like we're quite quick at improving features and developing them and making them better. And we'll continue doing that for Pro-Workspace, really.
Brilliant. And like I say, it's great to see that transition into the workplace and stuff as well. So I've got one final question. We've got a couple of minutes left before I hand back to Antony. But you know, what do you feel is the biggest impact, I'll say, for a business or an organisation when an employee has, you know, a neurodiversity, in terms of getting what they need in order to do their work? You know, is there anything in particular you feel is the biggest impact that a business has on that?
Yeah, so when we've kind of looked into the workplace side of it, yeah, productivity is what it all comes down to, and helping the employee. So whatever you're helping them with, if you can, you know, tackle that barrier with a piece of assistive technology, that allows that employee to concentrate on what they're really good at. So they can get on with their work, carry on with what they're really good at, be creative or whatever it is their role is, and not worry about, in our case, the research side of things, if that's what they've got to do, a lot of research. So, I mean, there's a great stat in the Forbes magazine, 50% of research is re-looked up. In the workplace, so if they spend 4 hours a day or 4 hours a week looking for research, they'll spend 2 hours of that time re-looking for what they've already found. So that's what we're coming back to, that productivity side of things. And if you can take that stress away, stop them being overwhelmed, then their mental health may improve and they'll be happier, and in return they'll be even more productive. And, you know, it just makes a good working environment, really. And that's what we're all about, and we're trying to help find these solutions for, and just, if everyone can just kind of find that solution to the specific difficulty their employees having through AT or other means, then they'll have a really good workplace. And that's our kind of overall goal.
Perfect, brilliant. Well, thank you very much. Like I say, I think we're all looking forward. I know Becki is already using Pro-Workspace, so we're all going to be looking forward to seeing that in lots of different work environments and stuff going forward. So thank you, Jonathan. And just right on cue, I'll hand back to Anthony.
Thank you.
Were you worried I'd gone for a brew?
I was worried he disappeared. I thought he's gone that or an ice cream, one or the other. Or Becki mentioned biscuits earlier, which really, really made me feel hungry.
Yeah, I can do that, I'm afraid. No, here I am back again. Thank you all very much for staying with us, guys. So if I could welcome Matt, obviously stay on the line, Jonathan, Becki and Nicola to come back and join us just for the Q&A here at the end. We've got a few questions that have been messaged through, so we'll just pick these up and then share them afterwards. So thank you all very, very much. Really appreciate it. It's been a fascinating afternoon. Really has been most engaging. So no, really, really insightful. One of the questions, one of the very first questions I just jotted down though, right at the very start of this session. And Nicola, I'm going to throw this one out to you. But we talk a lot about attracting neurodiverse talent. And we've talked a lot about sort of, the benefits to the organization in terms of productivity. There's also got to be a retention piece in there as well, because, the cost of attracting new talent is significant. Do you generally find that, inclusive organizations are, better prepared and better able to retain that talent?
This enables me to do a sales patter, Anthony. If you follow the neurodiversity SMART model,
exactly,
basically, it's a bit like Becki said, audits. So we do neurodiversity audits, and as part of the neurodiversity SMART model, you're looking at auditing from where an organisation is at with recruitment, their environment, their individual services, to their ability to retain individuals, and what systems they have in place. And once you've done this sort of audit, then you can make recommendations, or you can make process documents or training or procedures to help them facilitate that journey. I think it's beyond whether someone's neurodiverse. It's like, if you have a good organizational system and you follow the L&D principles, in terms of retention, in terms of getting out the best out of people, it should be more about getting the best out of people and providing the support that somebody needs. And that the organization should try and have all those avenues open, whether that be neurodiversity, whether that be mental health, whether that be wanting to do further education in different types of qualification. So I think a lot of organizations find it hard to understand about neurodiversity, because a lot of organizations maybe tick the box, and so they have maybe the attraction stuff, but don't necessarily do the work after that, or they have the recruitment, but they may not understand how to support people. Or it might be they've chosen a tick box scheme where you can tick all these things and you can have all these things. But, talent and retention is all about line management and conversations and really clear processes and pathways for people to follow. And the agility is, again, in career frameworks to enable people to sort of find jobs that work for them and work for the organisation too. So I think that's a lot about, not only about retention, it's good talent management, it's good leadership skill, it's enabling people to have the coaching skills all the way through the business so they can get the best out of people, rather than necessarily leading autocratically. So I think it goes beyond retention. I think certain organisations are way more advanced than other organisations, but what's lovely to see is that this is becoming such a growth area with so many people talking about it, and the more people talk about it, the more people learn about it, the more people are less scared by it, and then the more people integrate it into businesses. And so since Lexxic started 15 years ago, it is just changing so much, and it's so lovely to see. And I think more people are being touched, either one person removed or two person removed with maybe a child that has a neurodiverse condition, or they're seeing it in themselves. And because there's much more awareness, then you get many more people who are disclosing, get more people passionate about the area, and they sit in all roles in organisations. And if you just get one driver or one neurodiversity champion, then that starts the change.
It does. And I think in that senior leadership buy-in as well, if you can sort of, start to score that at sort of senior management director level, that just cascades down through the organisation. I think it's makes such a difference, such a difference.
And I think the key thing is, like, now we're seeing less fear of asking what neurodiversity is. I think there was a lot of fear around it before, so people, maybe try to avoid the question, but they're actually starting to realise that what it actually means, and how many people it affects, and the potential there. So it's great. But when anyone enters a job, regardless of a label, it's if someone gets a great coaching experience with a manager, and someone goes on a good talent plan, and they get to understand who they are and get the best out of themselves, then if you apply that across all employees, then the organisation will just have a much better culture anyway.
Yeah, no, completely agree. I'm just going to roll off on that to Becki and possibly Jonathan, through your training experience in terms of UK organisations. Are they embracing neurodiversity in the workplace, or is there still sort of, as Nicola's just sort of alluded to, a significant amount of fear that is still keeping people back from having those conversations? Go on, Becki.
I think certainly the platform's changed quite radically over the last few years, because more neurodivergent people are actually leading processes of change, and also speaking about it very openly as well. And we're sort of taking that microphone and owning the stage for ourselves. In the past, we've always had people speak on our behalf. We've used quite deficit style language, not us personally, but people speaking for us, like specific learning difficulty or specific learning challenges, those old chestnuts. But at the same time, with neurodiversity, it's about inclusion, and also recognizing that it's a spectrum. I think one of the things that I find in particular is when some of the stuff I see is about, well, I've worked with an autistic person before. And you're like, right, that's great. You've worked with an autistic person. Well done. Brilliant. But that person's not probably going to have the same sort of requirements or the same different ways of thinking as your person. But I think there needs to be stronger focus on cross-profile, so that we are a spectrum, and that literally people will be autistic dyslexic or autistic dyspraxic, or have autistic ADHD and dyspraxia and things like that, because often people tend to use time-honored approaches, and it's sometimes about having that conversation about how it's going to work for that particular person, what can be the key understanding of the resources you've got, but also what else do you need to bring in. Another thing to think about is when the organisation is doing well and that person is feeling confident, what happens when that relationship starts to change between line manager and the person? So how can we manage that as well? Because there's those micro behaviours that can very easily turn to be quite difficult things to manage for neurodivergent people, particularly in terms of if they've spoken about particular difficulties. They may have sensory processing for me, and it's about how that person can, how that line management situation in that relationship can actually be resolved before it becomes a problem.
I think that is a big key to it. That's fabulous. Jonathan, just from sort of the training perspective as much as the AT perspective, one of the big divisions we see across the sector is that in higher education, we see a very significant proportion of students engaging with assistive technology. And yet the moment it sort of moves through to the workplace, we see that plummet. Is that around, Lucy will kill me for using this word, but disclosure, or is it through the adaptations being in place, or what do you think is the barrier that exists in the workplace that stops people sort of really embracing as much assistive technology and reasonable adjustments as maybe they could benefit from?
If I knew that, Anthony, I'd be a very, very rich man.
It is a wonderful question. It's one that we've battled with for years.
I think there's probably a lot of reasons, really. I don't think you could really just say there's one particular reason. I think we do find in the workplace it's always the same kind of one or two technologies that get recommended. So there's perhaps not as much knowledge or expertise about what's actually available. And I think I touched on this earlier. It's very easy just to try and tick a box. Yep. So you say, oh, like I said, the example earlier, someone's dyslexic, so let's give them something to help with their spelling. And so it's very easy just to try and tick a box. And I think if they can try and let's try and get away from that a little bit and find real solutions. I think the uptake will be much better, and we can, get that user to really engage with the assistive technology. They soon realise, you see it when you're training them, they straight away, they love it, but you've just got to get them to that point. And so you can get someone in front of a trainer, or just in front of the software, a decent piece of assistive technology. I think we'll see a great improvement. Yeah.
I think I'm just going to hold you there for a second, because I think one of the challenges at the moment is a lot of big tech are promoting their mainstream software as being all things to all people. And therefore, I think there's a feeling, certainly within some organizations, that they don't need to worry about AT because they've already got, I'm not going to name any brands, but their productivity software already does everything for everybody, because that's what it says on the box. But there's definitely, I think, a sense from our community, yes, that gets you so far, and it's great that they're engaging, and that is becoming more mainstream, but it's still not the be all and end all. It's not the panacea that they sort of tout it to be. There's still that last gap that needs bridging. Would you sort of think that's a fair summary of where we're at?
Yeah, absolutely. I think again, won't name anyone, but the big softwares, they'll do like a basic version of a feature, and then and so it looks like it can help, and it probably sounds like it can on the box, but with assistive technology, it's all in the detail really, and the only way you get that detail is to talk to the users, and that's what assistive technology specialists should be doing, talking to the end user, not just saying, I want to develop a feature. You've got to talk to the people who are using that feature, and you'll find it's slightly different when you start looking at the detail.
Yeah, no, it's a fair comment. I'm going to throw this one out to everybody. In terms of the factors that are holding back employers from fully embracing neurodiversity in the workplace, is that a lack of knowledge, a lack of confidence, a lack of budget, a lack of awareness? Jonathan's just mentioned, far too often we see the reliance on one or two pieces of software instead of looking at the full gamut of solutions that's available out there. Nicola, what would you say is one of the biggest sort of things that really hold employers back from having that confidence to really embrace it and go with it and benefit from it?
Well, I think some employers might actually think they have embraced it. So people might go, oh yeah, I have embraced it because we've run an awareness event. They run an awareness event, or they do something like that, and they feel like they've embraced it, but maybe they haven't realised they haven't embraced it through the full cycle. Or back to this sort of aspect of fear. Do we want to open something that might create something that we don't know, or do we want to just tick the box and carry on because we've got other things that we want to address? So I feel like it's a mixed bag. I feel like some people think they've addressed it when they've only maybe done an awareness piece. Some people have the fear of, I don't know what will happen if I do address this. Or you get lots of organisations that are, are wanting to learn. And that's why things like BDF are really good, Business Disability Forum, because, employers can join that, and they can join, across span on lots of sort of disability learning differences issues, and they can learn lots about best practice and the processes they need to go through. So that can really support businesses. I think it's also, it's agendas. It's like, unfortunately, with COVID, so many agendas have changed, and so many people are looking at critical, like maybe downsizing the team or doing different things because of how the organisational, needs have changed. Maybe they're sort of, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of need, maybe they're working just more on basics again because of changes in environment and changes in economy. So, but generally speaking, what we're seeing a much larger appetite for organisational change. And an approach to neurodiversity like there is to mental health, and looking at sort of strategy and organisations and implementing that. And, think of the mental health first aiders, similar to neurodiversity. So it's really lovely that, people are having that conversation, but it's still a very new conversation, and it's still a conversation that, people are getting their heads around. But you definitely see more organisations wanting to support people across the spectrum of neurodiversity and implementing processes through external providers or through occupational health. But I think it's back to Jonathan's point of, if you don't speak to the users, or if you don't speak to people in your organisation who have neurodiverse conditions, you're not going to know what's working. You're not going to know what people need, because it could vary depending upon sector or what's happening at any one time. So having that sort of 360-degree feedback approach, having policies, having activities which makes the conversation open, really helps people to disclose and feed back to organisations about best practice approaches, because there are so many examples of organisations which are really embracing this. But a lot of organisations embrace this because maybe they've got a champion at the top who is affected by neurodiversity, or maybe they're seeing that there's direct effects on maybe recruitment types and productivity in certain roles. So, but it's definitely something which is more and more on the agenda, which is just so great to see.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. I've just got 2 questions left before we run out of time, if that's okay, guys. And one I'm going to throw out to Matt, because bless him, he's been having far too easy a time of it so far. Matt, you've worked with a lot of organizations and employers in the implementation of assistive technologies. In terms of the difference that it makes to those organizations, can you give us any sort of insights into how they've gained in confidence and productivity through the embracing of those employees and assistive technology?
Oh, blimey, I thought you'd catch me one of those questions right at the end there. So I guess in terms of the assistive technology, I think what companies will recognize that do embrace it is the benefit that it makes to individuals. So, and actually, I think not only those that maybe have disclosed a disability and therefore require it, but actually across the board in terms of the features that the products have, and actually where everybody can actually benefit from it. So, I've seen it with text-to-speech products where you can turn your emails into audio files. So for those that as everybody in the company knows, I'm a massive listener of podcasts. I like to take information in an audible way, and I find that a lot easier. I know, if we're talking about things like, organisation research, things like that, being able to categorise things in a visual way, or, colour coordinate things is a lot easier for a lot of people that may or may not have actually disclosed a disability. So I think from a business point of view, getting the applications, getting people to see the benefits is the key to getting it used, really.
No, that's fab. In which case, I'm just going to hand over to one last question to Becki before thanking you all and letting you go and have your tea. Becki, just from a personal perspective, do you think your career would have gone the way that it has and given you the chances that you've had and the wonderful breadth of experience you've got if assistive technologies weren't there to support you through that journey?
Oh, good Lord, that's a good question. I did have a very negative experience within Heritage, and that pushed a button that said something's got to give, something's got to change. And that's what my EDI work is now, working with EMBED, working with you guys, working with my different hats, because for me, it's about clearing the path to make it easier for somebody else and reduce the risk in terms of what I experienced. And it gives me the confidence that I may have lost through that experience. So I've got my wonderful sat nav, which is fantastic. I've also got my various other tools, because I'm like, it changes and flips the narrative. It's not me with the problem. It's those barriers that sometimes societal, systemic barriers that can cause the difficulties. But I tell you what, the comeback when you have done something and you sit there and you think, oh yes, sorted, like that, it's 10 times the amount because of that negative experience, because you've made a difference for people that you haven't even met yet. And that's what gets me up on a Monday morning.
I think that's the best way to summarize why we all do what we do, that we're making that difference. I know for Jonathan, for Nicola, for Matt, it's a huge driver. And Becki, that's so inspirational and a great note to conclude this session on. So in which case, it just leaves me to thank Nicola, Becki, Jonathan, Matt, John, who's been absolutely fantastic working in the background to bring all this together. Really appreciated all your hard work. Thank you to our guests today, and just thank you very much. We hope you stay safe, and we hope we see you all again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Cheers, everybody. Thanks.
Bye now, bye.
Thank you all. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.